about the other stuff.
So I am going to introduce Bridget Berger, and she is from Groves Learning Organization, and she's going to talk to you about our new preschool initiative, Believe and Read.
Thank you. Welcome. I can tell there's a lot of excitement in the room. Pre-K people are my age of teachers, so I'm really excited to be sharing this presentation with you today. We're going to have two parts in an hour presentation, so it's going to go kind of quick. The first part is going to be an overview of the science of reading and how it relates to early years development. And then we are going to talk specifically about how the Groves Method curriculum will support that, and how that works with Cisco's initiatives to try to offer this to you if it's a curriculum that you're interested in. So really brief bit on me. I've been a coach for 6 years. Before that, I was a classroom teacher for 13 years. I did first grade, second grade, and I did a STEM class for pre-K through second grade. So, really quickly, how many people have heard of Groves Literacy Partnerships before? All right, good. How many of you are attached to a school that uses Believe and Read? Okay, so I can go through these pretty quickly. Just want to make sure everybody knows a little bit about us and our partnership with Cisco. So you may have heard of Groves Academy. A lot of people think that we're just the school. There's actually 3 arms to our organization. There's the Academy, which is a 1st through 12th school. Then there's the Learning Center, where students can come for tutoring or diagnostic services. And I work for Groves Literacy Partnerships, which goes out to partner schools. So I'm actually very rarely in the actual building. This year, our partnerships are working with 80 different schools in about 475 classrooms. And a very large percentage of those are Believe and Read schools with Cisco. You've probably heard about the learning gap across the country, but specifically in Minnesota, that not all of our students are proficient readers by 4th grade. In fact, so many are not proficient readers that if you had them make a chain of arms, those students would stretch from Rochester to Duluth. And this is updated information, so post-COVID information. It hasn't really changed in the past 10 years. But our partner schools are seeing a lot of growth through the framework that we bring in. And I'm talking right now about K-3 partner schools, and we'll talk a little bit about where pre-K fits into that as well. In our partner schools, 97% of students see growth in their oral reading fluency, and 7 out of 10 students in grades 1 through 3 that started below grade level had, by the end of the year, grown to the point where they were, their percentiles were 10 points higher than they were at the beginning of the year, which may not sound like a lot, but it is. And when we're talking about percentiles, that's a significant growth. So I see that we're already situated at tables, and maybe you know the people at your tables, maybe you don't. Let's just take 2 quick minutes to share. Why are you here today? Like what's making you interested in this partnership if you are feeling slightly interested or curious? All right, so let's just take 2 minutes. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's bring it back. All right. I think if we did like a thumbs up, thumbs down, we would likely all agree that the reason that we're here is to be better providers for the students that we see every day, right? And then how we get from point A to point B might be different in different schools, but that's what we want to do. And if you looked at those statistics of students who reach 4th grade and are not proficient readers, you can kind of see that the beginnings of that in pre-K. And so what can we do as early childhood educators to try to head that off at the pass and get kids on the right track so that they can experience success in their future academic career? So I'm going to start with a brief overview of the science of reading. Now this is it's a large topic. We're not going to cover everything. I'm going to give you some little tidbits to begin with, and then some suggestions of other resources you can look at if you are interested and you want to go down that rabbit hole. So we're going to start with a true, false. Again, I'm an elementary teacher, so we do lots of thumbs up, thumb down. You can kind of, instead of just shouting out true or false, you can just give me a visual signal about what you think about this statement. Unlike learning to speak, learning to read and write does not come naturally. You are so much better than the 4th and 5th grade teachers I was working with. No one was giving me a thumb. I'm like, come on, guys, I need to know what you're thinking. Fantastic. I see a lot of thumbs up. That one is true. And actually, Matt, do you know how to, I forgot to introduce Matthew Brandt, who is my colleague at GLOW. And if you have questions about the curriculum partnerships, he can help you answer them. How could I play this if I'm not mirrored? Is there a way to do that? Thank you. I have a short video that kind of goes into how learning to read and write is different than learning how to speak.
What if you couldn't read? How would you perceive words if reading wasn't possible? For anything you encountered with words, you would just see a series of symbols with no meaning or purpose. In fact, humans are not meant to read. Our brains did not evolve for reading. Our brains are extraordinarily organized from the time we are very young for speech processing. The same is true for our vision. Reading, on the other hand, is not innate and requires the collective activity of many areas of our brain. Babies already have a sophisticated spoken language and visual system, but to learn to read, our brains must be trained to connect our visual system with our spoken language system, actually changing the way our brain codes phonemes and connects those sounds to meaning. We know this because researchers have used imaging techniques to show what actually happens inside the different parts of the brain when a person reads. When we read the word ingredients, for example, it activates the occipital lobe in the back of our brain in the same way any other visual stimuli would. This visual area in the brain instantly analyzes the visual features of the word. From here, it quickly moves into an area that cognitive neuroscientist Dr. Stanislaus Dehaene calls the brain's letterbox, or visual word form area. This is where we store our knowledge of letters, recognize single letters, letter combinations, whole words, and acquire the knowledge of patterns of the written system of a language. Scientists have measured the activity in brains of literate and illiterate subjects and detected brain activity in various parts of the brain that are changed by learning to read. Brain scans confirm the letterbox is only activated in people who have learned to read, and it will only activate for the known letters in direct proportion to reading scores. When we learn an alphabetic language, we change the way our brain codes the sounds of speech, attributing these phonemes to different letters. This process literally changes the neurological processing that happens in the visual cortex in our brain. But it doesn't stop there. Learning to read requires first recognizing the letters and how they combine into written words in the letterbox area, and then connecting them to the coding for speech sounds. Reading and comprehension is achieved most efficiently by first teaching letter-sound correspondences. Consider the word ingredients from our recipe. The word is associated with its meaning in the temporal lobe. At the same time, the brain detects the sounds needed to say the word. Once a child can recognize letter-sound correspondences, the anatomy of the brain changes and creates a whole new modality for language input. The child can identify words and recognize them auditorily to then access their meaning. This process develops yet a second route to support reading, going from vision to meaning. Hence, the idea that there are two routes of reading is a critical piece of all models of the process of reading. We know that reading is not hardwired in the brain, but scientists have studied what happens inside the brain to become a skillful reader. Attention, active engagement, error feedback, and consolidation are the four pillars that Dr. Dehaene calls the secret ingredients of successful learning to help students learn more efficiently. Because the brain can change to learn new things, reading teachers should employ explicit instruction methods that strengthen the neural pathways and allow students to become strong and successful readers.
The important takeaway from that is our brains are hardwired for speech, but not for reading. So we have to physically create neural connections in the brain so that we can read. And if you don't do that, then you can't read. It's not just something you're going to pick up by watching somebody else do it. And I know that you are not working with your students to teach them the word ingredients, but the brain starts developing at birth. So there's a lot that you can do to start prepping those neural pathways as early childhood educators to put them on that path for success later in school when they are reading multisyllabic words like ingredients. There we go. Okay. Next one, true or false? The science of reading is really just about phonics instruction. I see a lot of confident thumbs down. Good job, that was false. That's just half of it. There's a framework that we use at GLOW that many proponents of the science of reading use called the simple view of reading. And that says that reading comprehension, which is the goal of reading, so understanding and pulling meaning from text, is a multiplication of the ability to read words and the ability to understand language. So if you just teach phonics, which side are you doing? You just point. Yeah, you're doing the decoding. But you can't leave out language comprehension because it's a multiplication equation. If one of those elements is 0, what does that mean for the product? Yeah, it's going to be 0. Now, nothing is that simple. I know we call it the simple view of reading, but we realized some nuance needed to be added. So a researcher named Scarborough, I forget the first name, developed this other way of looking at it called the reading rope. We still have those two elements, decoding and language comprehension, but there are sub-skills within those domains. So for example, decoding would be phonological awareness, the ability to recognize sight words. Language comprehension is vocabulary, background knowledge, understanding grammar, understanding print concepts, things like that. Hopefully some of you are like, oh, okay, yeah, those are some things that we do in pre-K. You can see the side here where pre-K is going to be really building some important skills that will help students in their future. Okay, next one. The science of reading is focused primarily on grades K through 3. I think it can feel this way, especially when I lead with slides that are like, here's all of my data about 1st through 3rd graders. But it's not true. There is quite a good body of research into brain development in early childhood. And again, I know we're not teaching pre-K students how to read multisyllabic words, but we are setting them up with these early developmental skills that they're going to need. I don't know if it would be pronounced NELP or NELP report, was a governmental meta-analysis that was commissioned in order to look at all of the research that had been done on early years education to see if we could suss out some agreement on what are important predictors of future success. So this is not a list of things that you should necessarily teach, but it is a list of things that are associated with students who are able to read later in life. Some of them you can teach. So the first that are in blue, alphabetic knowledge, is the understanding that letters make sounds. Phonological awareness is the ability to hear discrete sounds in words or to break connected speech into smaller pieces. Phonological memory is the ability to hold that in your short-term memory and then be able to kind of spit it back out. Writing, specifically name writing, was a huge predictor of later success in school. Rapid automatic naming is kind of a hot topic right now because this is a strong predictor of success, but it's not something you can teach. We tried. It didn't actually work. It's just a hallmark of a student who is on the right path they're good at rapid automatic naming. And that includes being able to go through like a page and name numbers or letters or colors and objects. What's interesting about that then is you can use that as a test, as a screener, to tell if a student is potentially at risk for learning difficulties. But it's not a good idea to then, from a whole lesson on going through pages and naming all of the animals that you see as quickly as you can. So those are strongly tied to future reading success. The green were areas that the report identified as moderately correlated, and maybe they needed some more research, but I think they're worth knowing about. So concepts of print, knowing which way to turn a book's page, knowing books top and bottom, the left to right. Reading readiness, oral language, visual processing are all a little bit murkier, but still potentially really important. And that then ties in with another governmental report called the NRP, or the National Reading Panel Report, which is from 2000. This is specifically for elementary age students, but I think it's good for you to know where your kids are headed. The panel identified 5 main areas that need to be instructed on in kindergarten and beyond in order to have an effective program. Again, it's a meta-analysis, so they looked at every piece of available research and tried to put it all together. So elementary schools need to work on phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary comprehension. I said it was done in 2000. That's starting to get a little bit old, so we're adding, as more information is coming out, writing and oral language are particularly things that are being brought up as also very important. They were called out in the Minnesota READ Act. Again, this doesn't mean like this is what your pre-K program is going to look like, because we know pre-K is very different than elementary school, but it's just kind of good to know like this is what, starting in kindergarten, we're really going to focus on teaching. Okay, any questions on that so far? All right. So now that we have that kind of basis of understanding that reading isn't natural, we wire our brains for it, pre-K is going to look different than elementary, I'm going to talk through the framework of looking at our curriculum and say how that supports the development of these pre-reading skills. And we'll practice some of the activities as well, so you kind of get a feel for it. So our Groves Method pre-K program really focuses on 3 areas. Phonemic awareness is the biggest focus because that was one of those predictors that we identified that you can actually train students in, and it does actually improve their outcomes later. The alphabetic principle, which again is letters are tied to sounds, and letter formation. Now, I'm going to note that this is pre-K, and so I know that we can kind of throw terms around. We would say this is a curriculum that is aimed at students in their year before kindergarten. This wouldn't be for your like 3-year-old classroom necessarily. That it would not be developmentally appropriate in most cases to bring, you know, the kind of alphabet instruction we're going to be doing. We can definitely talk about elements of this, like phonemic awareness can be started. You know, it starts almost immediately after children are born and they start hearing speech. So there are elements of this that can go younger, but this is designed for your kids that are headed to kindergarten next year. And it is supplemental to your core literacy curriculum. Again, if you look at what this hits and you think back to the simple view of reading, this is really just addressing one side of the equation. And then what's missing from this would be developing vocabulary, print awareness, all of those comprehension tasks, the oral language. That's not included here, so you can't just use this and think that, okay, I got all of my literacy skills done. So I'm going to start with phonemic awareness. How familiar do we feel with phonemic awareness? You do thumbs up, I totally got it, I do it already. Sideways is like, I've heard the word before. And thumbs down would be like, I have no idea what you're talking about right now. Okay. So you might hear terms It's not going to be a vocabulary test at the end, but phonological awareness was called out in that NELP report. Think of that as the umbrella term, right? Phonological awareness means anything having to do with speech sounds. We can break that down into smaller and smaller chunks. When I'm talking now, it just sounds like constant sound coming out. If you don't speak English, you might not know where one word starts and ends. So the first chunk of connected speech would be words. Then we can take longer words and break them into syllables. Most words in English are single syllables, but when we get into like academic stuff, we get longer words. Then we can get even smaller than syllables. We can do onset rhyme. So that would be the first sound and then everything that comes after it. You can also do body coda, which would be most of the word and then just the last sound. So that's starting to pull apart these smaller speech sounds. The most fine-grained way we can work with speech sounds would be phoneme awareness, and that is the individual sounds of each word. All right, you with me so far? Good. Sometimes we use phonological and phonemic awareness interchangeably, but I think it's good to know that phonological awareness actually encompasses a whole lot more. Phonemic awareness really just refers to that last element there, that individual sounds. And we know that this is really important, that students who receive this kind of training do better, and you can track that all the way through high school, which is why we spend so much time in our curriculum working on this, because we know you're going to get the most bang for your buck if you have a student who's struggling with this. Help them with that early, and you can put them on that path for success through high school. Okay, so now we're going to play around with words a little bit. I've chosen 3 words. We're going to break them into syllables. Then we'll also practice onset rhyme, body coda, and phonemes. And again, not going to be a vocab test, but I'll walk you through one. Then we'll have a little bit of time to work, and we'll come back and check. And you can talk with your colleagues at your table. So, ship. How many syllables do we think that has? 1 syllable. Onset rhyme would be the first sound, and then everything else. What do you think the first sound is? Yep. Now, and then everything else would be ip. What if we did body coda? So that's the first part of the word and just the ending sound. Yeah. Either sh, ip, or sh, p. Onset is easier to identify than the ending sound. Just so when you're working through this, you always want to start with the simpler tasks and work up to more challenging tasks. Oh, I forgot to ask. How many sounds in the word ship? Yeah, because the SH actually only makes 1 sound. So letters do not always, like the number of letters doesn't always match the number of sounds in a word. Okay, so now that we've kind of done this, why don't you try book and cupcake? You don't have to write it down, but just maybe talk through it with the people at your table. I'll give you 2 minutes to do this. Yeah. Exactly. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right, let's bring it back and check your answers. I was just talking with Matt about this, and he brought up a really good point. This is often harder for adults than kids because we're thinking about the letters, but your pre-K student isn't worried that SH has 2 letters. They're just listening and hearing shh. So typically, it'll be easier for them. The good news is you're provided with a manual that has all of this written down. So if you blink out and you're not quite sure what's the body coda, it's there in front of you. Okay, let's try book. Show of hands, or show me with your fingers. How many syllables? That's 1. That's right. A syllable has 1 vowel sound, so that's why you can see ship and book have 1 syllable. Onset rhyme, body coda. It's either book or book. And then phonemes. How many did this one have? Yeah, book. All right, cupcake. How many syllables do you think that one had? Yeah. Compound word makes it a little bit easier. This one's kind of funny. Onset rhyme, upcake, or cupcake. And then how many phonemes? It's going to be a little longer. In the upper grades, we have kids tap sounds. So we have a, p, k, a, k. Yeah, that would be 6. And notice that K at the end doesn't have the silent E. Whenever we have those slashes, that indicates we're saying the sound instead of the letter name. This is true in your manual as well. And that's the first one to understand. When you're doing this phonemic awareness with your students, you're not telling them the letters. They're not looking at the words. It's all auditory. So you wouldn't say like, oh yeah, ship has 4 letters. Like, they don't need to know that. We're just working on the sounds. As I said, you get a manual. And we use something called the Hegarty Phonemic Awareness Program. It's separate from Grove's method, but it's provided in your instructional kit. And it has, each day has a lesson plan. Actually, it shows the whole week on one page. And then you go through different activities for each day. And with this manual, you're directed to do all of the activities that are provided for each day. There's some change from week to week, but mostly it stays the same. It is systematic and sequential, which is really, really important. Those 2 words sometimes I think go over our heads. Systematic means the format doesn't change. So you're not coming up with a new song or a game every day. The kids will learn the roller coaster game, and they'll know what you mean after you train them in it the first time. The words are going to change. The words might get more challenging, but it's systematic. And then sequential means it develops the activities in a logical progression from least complex to most complex. So you would start with onset rhyme before moving to body coda, because that one's more difficult. The lesson plan has 5 days, and the same activities for the most part, with a little bit of change. And we're going to practice some of the hand motions. I saw when some of you were practicing, you were already kind of getting your hands into it. That is absolutely something that is encouraged because it gives students a great visual. First of all, a cue if they've learned it before. You got your roller coaster out, they know what they're doing. But also to just kind of like feel what part of the word you're manipulating. Like, is it the middle sound? Are we pulling something apart? Are we taking something away? There is a link, like a QR code in the book that you can scan it, and it will show you the hand motions because it does have a written out description, but sometimes those are just, it's really hard to picture when they're using words instead of just seeing someone do it. This is what the scope and sequence looks like. So you can see how it goes through, compound words before syllables in words that don't have compound words, because again, compound words are easier to split apart because you can hear the separate words. Okay, so we are going to practice some activities, and I am going to do the best to do it while holding this. What I recommend when you are practicing these is that you would have your manual on your lap, be sitting in a chair, because you're going to need both hands for the activities. That works pretty well. Okay, we're going to start with rhyme. So sometimes it's simply rhyme identification. And you might just say, okay, class, what rhymes with cake? Sheep or snake? And the kids would say, right, and this should be, after the first time you do it, might be a little tricky, but after the second or third time, the responses become automatic, and this should be a very rapid fire activity for engagement, but also just for your own pacing to make sure you can get through everything in the time required. Sometimes you might do a really fun game. This one I think might be the favorite of the kids that I work with. It's a game called Categories. So the category is colors. And then I'm going to say a silly word. You need to think about what the real word might be, okay? My 3-year-old does it. These are a lot of fun. So the category is colors. What about turple? Okay, I didn't even tell them we're working with rhymes, but they're listening to the sounds and trying to think, turple, turple, turple. What rhymes with turple? That's a color. Okay, how about zello? Okay, what about sked? How about treen? There you go. We can also isolate sounds at the beginning, the middle, or the end. And there's different hand motions for each of the games. So if we were going to isolate at the beginning, those are initial phonemes. I'm just going to say a sentence. I want your response is, what sound do you hear at the beginning of every word? Paint purple pictures. What do you hear? Very good. Okay, what about if I just said shoe shake? Yeah, there you go. When we're doing middle sounds, there's a game called the roller coaster game, where you say the word while you're doing a roller coaster, and you're listening for that middle sound before you say the end. So I'll do an example, and you can do the next one with me. So if we were going to roller coaster nap, it would sound like this. Nap. All right, let's all together try roller coastering pick. Here we go. Pick. All right, let's do one more. Let's try the word hop. Roller coaster it. What's the middle sound? Very good. And you may have noticed that the last one, I didn't do it with you. Once your kids get the ability to do it, you turn your voice off and let them do it on their own. I would recommend doing the motion with them, so it keeps someone from going really fast and someone from going really slow, but they're not relying on the sound of your voice to know what the answer is. Okay, this one, punch it out is for final sounds. And it's motion like this. I have to do it backwards, so it would appear left to right to you. That's one tricky part when you're doing these, is to remember to do it backwards. So you say the word and hear the final sound. I'll give you an example. If we were going to do pick, I'd say pick. So you kind of are using your body to be like, yep, that's the last sound. Do you want to try to punch it out? Okay, let's do it with the word hop. Everybody punch it out. There you go, you got it. When we are blending, there's different motions for the different size pieces of words. We could blend syllables, onset rhyme, body coda, and phonemes. For syllables, we're going to use choppers. I'm not going to chop with you, but you guys can chop. So if we were going to chop apart the word sunset, we're blending. I'm going to give you the two parts. You're going to put it together. Ready? Okay, so let's do the word excite. Good job. This can get confusing because we do blending and we do segmenting, and they're the same, they're just reverse. I'll get to that in a minute. Okay, let's try this word. Repeat. Excellent. And then sunset. So I provided the pieces of the words, and you put them together. We can also do body coda, onset, rhyme. Phonemes, we would use tapping fingers, which I showed you before, and this gets used all the way through 3rd grade. So if I tap out the sounds, you would then tell me what my word is. I sometimes call this the secret word game. So let me tap this word out. P-l-a-n. Good job. How about r-at? R-o. Excellent. Now, as I mentioned, segmenting is the opposite of blending. So when you blend, I give you the pieces, you put them together. Segmenting is a little bit harder. I give you the whole word, and then you're pulling it into pieces. So why don't we try some syllables? If I said, let's chop out excite, can you chop it with me? Good job. I use the same words on purpose so you can kind of see how it goes in both directions. Let's try the word repeat. Chop it. Repeat. Excellent. Let's try to tap out the word plain. Excellent. If you decide to partner with Cisco and receive this curriculum, you will also receive some coaching and some other professional development. One really important piece that we address through coaching is the pronunciation of phonemes. Separating speech sounds is not natural. Like, we don't ever just say a word in its little pieces. And so consonants can be really hard to pronounce all on their own. We want to add a vowel sound at the end because they're just easier to say that way. That's what vowels do. They help keep the word, glue the words together. So when you're tapping plain, you might just naturally say pa. We want to chop off that and try to, as much as possible, sometimes it's really hard, but as much as possible, just make that sound, the pa. It's just a little bit of air coming out of your mouth. And this does actually impact students' ability to sound out words later. If they're learning that P says pa, or R is like a R sound, that's going to make it harder for them to blend in the future. That was a little rabbit hole, but I wanted to just make sure I got that out there. Deleting would be taking sounds away. For this, we use open palms. And when we take a sound away, just put a hand behind your back. So let's try deleting syllables. Say sunset. Now say it without sun. Very good. Say jumping. Without ing. Good. We can do that with individual sounds too. Say, say lane. Without ul. Very good. It works better when you don't have a microphone in your hand, but you get the idea. So it's again, I do it backwards so they can see if it's a beginning or an ending from their left to right orientation. For you, it's going to be backwards. Adding is the same motion. This time, instead of taking away, you're adding. Substitution is the hardest. That's switching out a sound for another one. And for this one, let's try, say snowman. Change man to storm. Good job. Say rat. Change r to k. Okay. Kind of get the idea there? You can change any part of a word, beginning, middle, or end. Haggerty has it, again, organized so you go from least complex or challenging to most complex. Okay, there we go. This is what the lesson plan will look like. In order to make it big enough for everybody to see, I did have to cut a snip out. So what you're missing is at the top of this column, it would say Monday. And then the next one would say Tuesday. And you can't see Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, because it's going to be teeny tiny. Your manual will have directions at the beginning. Once you've taught it once, though, you know what to say. You don't have to read that every time, but it's there for your reference. And then all it does is provide the words for you. Again, remembering that wherever you see those slashes, it means you say the sound, not the letter. So for the first one, you're isolating that initial sound or initial phoneme. You say the word good. The kids should say g. That's where the G is in the little brackets. For phoneme isolation final sounds, you say the word tub, and the kids would say back b. And then you would just go through those words. Grab, the kids would say. Zone, right? And you can see how this goes really, really quickly once they get into it. You don't need 100% participation or correct answers, because even if a student isn't able to do this, or especially not able to do it at the speed as their peers, hearing it is still going to help them. And then if you have small groups, if you notice someone is struggling, this is something you can give them a second dose of. So watch your pacing. Don't slow down to the student who's having the most trouble, who needs the most time. Keep it paced to the majority of your class. You gesture right to left, not left to right. And it's good to preview these just to make sure you know what the hand motions are. If I ever see teachers kind of get the deer in the headlights look, it'll be they'll open up their book and realize like 2 of the games are new and they haven't practiced them and they're fumbling with what to do because it's a lot of words if you don't read it ahead of time. Okay, so that was phonemic awareness. Most of your lesson is phonemic awareness, but we do, after week 10, add in alphabet study. So we provide you with these keyword cards, and those are designed to give students like a tangible anchor for that word, or for that sound. So for example, in Grove's method, the jet is the j sound. So if they forget later, ooh, what's j? I could be like, oh, it's j like jet. And hopefully they'll remember like, oh, j, jet, j. We know that students need to understand or to know about the letter name, letter sound, and the symbol, which is called the grapheme. They need all of those 3 things in order to fully understand the alphabet and be able to read. Letter name might seem like, why do they need to know the letter name? We don't really know. We just know it's correlated with reading success. And there's a lot of theories about why letter name is so important. But yes, we need sound if we're sounding something out. Yes, we need to know the symbol, but knowing letter name is also important. And letter name often precedes the other 2 in terms of mastery. As much as possible, you want to disconnect from the ABC song. Not that you can't sing it, But when you're doing this instruction, we want to make sure we're isolating each of those sounds. And when we start singing in the song, how many of you have heard the LMNOP, like just one big speech sound? If you do want to sing that song with your students, we recommend just slowing it down a little bit and just taking it slower and making sure at the end of a line, you take a little breath before you go to the next part. That will help you break up the letters and hear them as discrete sounds. And as I mentioned, pronouncing those sounds accurately is really critical. So, like I said, this is an example of our keyword card for J. When you introduce it to students, take like less than a minute. This letter is J. Its picture is a jet. The sound it makes is J. J, jet, J. And the kids would repeat it. And you might need to correct them because they're going to add vowel sounds on too. They're going to say J. It's not J, it's J. And you can even have them practice like feeling the breath come out if they're really struggling with. There's little tips, things you can do if they're really struggling with adding that schwa sound on there. But that's it. Then you've introduced the letter. And then you'll do spiral review of all the letters you've introduced as you introduce new letters. They do this again in kindergarten. So I've had schools that I've worked with in pre-K ask, what's your mastery level here? We don't expect mastery in pre-K. Again, they're going to learn all of these again. We're trying to set them up for success, even if they're just understanding that letters make sounds, and they can't remember all the letter names. They can't match them all to their sounds, but they know that's what they do. Remember, that's one of that readiness milestones that we need early learners to meet. There we go. Okay. So why I am here and telling you all about this curriculum is because Cisco, through their preschool initiative, is offering to purchase these lovely kits that have all of the instructional materials you would need, as well as a training to go into more detail and get more practice with the curriculum, and then an hour at some point in the year of coaching or consulting. And that could be a coach coming in and modeling a lesson while you have kiddos. It could be consulting as like a meeting after school if you have specific questions or concerns to answer. So this is kind of the initiative and what's offered on the table. What you get in the curriculum kit would be a teacher's manual, the letter formation manual. One thing that I kind of glossed over was we do a little bit of handwriting. I'm doing this presentation again at the summit in October, and I'll talk more about handwriting then. But when we were developing this curriculum, we worked really hard to keep it developmentally appropriate for pre-K. It's not just a mini kindergarten. We're not trying to take kindergarten and shoehorn it into your classroom. And for some students, handwriting might not be appropriate. So handwriting is offered for small groups for students who are ready. And it's ideal to use the same language that they will be trained on in kindergarten if your elementary is a Believe and Read school. So you're provided with tools for that. It's not part of the whole group lesson, but you can use the writing paper that comes as a dry erase board. There's a formation manual that will tell you the steps to making the different letters, so we're all making them the same. Letter cards and keyword cards are used in your daily instruction. And the Heggerty manual, which is the bulk of what you're doing, the phonemic awareness piece. So that's what the kit looks like. If you want to see them closer, we have some that are kind of opened up here. So if this sounds enticing and you want to know more or you're interested, Una would be the person to contact with questions. Principals can fill out this form, which would indicate interest in the partnership. Do you want to actually take over? Perfect.
Thank you. So any schools that want to opt in, we're going to leave this up for a little bit, but then we'll also send this information out. So if you want to opt into the pre-K, the curriculum, you can go ahead and scan this right here. We do need to have the principals, though, from the schools submit the forms. And then what'll happen is it'll come through to us, because it also wants you to determine if you're going to have in-person training or virtual training. So there's a couple of questions that we need to ask for you. And then we'll start shipping them out to the schools and then get in contact with you to start setting up those training sessions and the coaching sessions. And then we also have, like Bridget said, we actually have a couple of sets out here. Katie actually brought her set too because we have one in the office. We can probably put it on the table if you guys want to take a look at it. And then we're also going to be raffling off 3 kits today. So we have 3 that the principals can take home today.
Yeah. Nope, that's it.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so then I am going to go ahead and raffle off